Every generation after them was handed a screen and told what to think. Every generation before them was told what to believe. But Gen X fell right in the gap. No internet, no safe spaces, no participation trophies, no algorithms to follow, just reality, raw, unedited and completely unfiltered. They were the latchkey kids, left alone after school with no supervision, no helicopter parents, no participation trophies just for showing up. They figured out life by living it, not by watching someone else live it on a screen. They felt real pain, real failure, real consequences, and that built something inside them that no other generation carries, a psychological toughness that cannot be taught, cannot be downloaded, and cannot be faked. That gap made them impossible to control, and the world has never seen anything like them since. But here is the real question. What exactly happened to Gen X that made them this way? And why has no generation since been able to replicate it? No mobile phones, no social media, no Google. If you wanted information, you went to a library. If you wanted to talk to someone, you knocked on their door. If you got lost, you figured it out yourself. There was no GPS telling you where to go. There was no algorithm telling you what to think. And here is what most people completely miss about that environment. It was not just inconvenient, it was psychologically transformative. When you have no one to rescue you, you learn to rescue yourself. When you have no one to validate you, you learn to validate yourself. When you have no safety net, you develop one inside your own mind. That internal safety net is called psychological resilience. And Gen X had to build it from scratch every single day. It means coming home from school to an empty house, key around your neck, parents still at work, no one checking if you did your homework, no one asking how your day was, no one making sure you were okay. For most generations that sounds like neglect. For Gen X that was Tuesday. And here is what that loneliness actually did. It forced them to develop something incredibly powerful: independence of thought. When no one is telling you what to think, you start thinking for yourself. When no one is telling you what to feel, you start trusting your own feelings. When no one is directing your every move, you start making your own decisions. This is exactly why Gen X cannot be manipulated the way other generations can. They never outsourced their thinking to anyone else. Not to parents, not to teachers, not to governments, and certainly not to algorithms. Gen X did not just listen to music, they lived inside it. Metallica, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, 9 Inch Nails. This was not background noise. This was their therapy, their rebellion, their identity. And what was the core message of all that music? Question everything. Trust nothing blindly. Feel your pain instead of running from it. Reject the fake, embrace the real. Think about that for a second. An entire generation was being psychologically programmed not by corporations or governments but by artists who were themselves outsiders and rebels. While baby boomers were told to chase the American dream and millennials were told to follow their passion, Gen X was told by their music to question whether the dream was even real in the first place. That skepticism became their superpower, and it still is. Every generation has a control mechanism, something that keeps them in line, something that can be used to direct their behavior, their spending, their thinking. For the silent generation, it was authority. You respected authority without question. For baby boomers, it was prosperity. Give them financial security and they will comply. For millennials, it was validation. They grew up being told they were special and now they need constant approval to function. For Gen Z, it is attention. Control the algorithm and you control them completely. But Gen X, what is their control mechanism? There is not one, and that is exactly what makes them dangerous. Gen X does not need your validation. They do not need your approval. They do not need to be the most liked or the most followed or the most celebrated. They just need to be left alone to do things their own way. And if you try to stop them, they will find another way. Anyway, this psychological independence did not come from privilege. It did not come from education. It came from years of being ignored, overlooked and underestimated, and having to figure everything out alone. Gen X grew up during the highest divorce rates in American history. The 1970s and 1982 saw divorce rates skyrocket. And Gen X were the children sitting in the middle of those broken homes, watching their parents split apart, being shuffled between houses. learning very early that the adults around them did not have all the answers. And what does that do to a child psychologically? It destroys the illusion of authority. When you watch the people who are supposed to have all the answers completely fall apart, you stop believing that anyone actually has all the answers. You stop trusting institutions blindly. You stop assuming that people in power know what they are doing. You become permanently skeptical, permanently independent, permanently uncontrollable. For Gen X, this was not trauma, this was education. Gen X figured out something that most people spend their entire lives trying to understand. Comfort is a trap. Every system, every government, every corporation, every social media platform is designed to keep you comfortable enough that you do not question it, keep you entertained enough that you do not look too closely, keep you distracted enough that you never ask the real questions. Gen X was never comfortable enough to fall into that trap. They were too busy surviving. And when you are busy surviving, you do not have time for illusions. You see things as they actually are, not as you wish they were, not as someone told you they were, as they actually are. That clarity of vision is something that cannot be manufactured. It can only be earned through difficulty, and Gen X earned it the hard way. Gen X is the smallest generation in modern American history. Sandwiched between the massive baby boomer generation and the enormous millennial generation, Gen X was simply too small to be worth marketing to in a serious way, and that turned out to be their greatest gift. Because when corporations are not trying to sell you an identity, you build your own. When advertisers are not telling you what is cool, you decide for yourself what is cool. When nobody is trying to shape your tastes and preferences, your tastes and preferences become genuinely your own. Gen X developed authentic individuality by accident, simply because they were too small and too overlooked for anyone to bother trying to manufacture their identity for them. And now, in a world where every generation's identity is packaged, marketed and sold back to them, Gen X stands alone as the last generation whose identity was truly their own. You might be thinking, okay, this is interesting, but why does it matter today? Here is why. We are living in the most controlled information environment in human history. Algorithms decide what you see. Platforms decide what is acceptable. Corporations decide what is true. And most people, regardless of their generation, are swimming in that controlled environment without even realizing it. But Gen X sees it. They see it because they remember what it was like before it existed. They have a reference point that younger generations simply do not have. They know what unfiltered reality feels like, and they recognize filtered reality when they see it. That makes them the most valuable voices in any room right now, not because they are nostalgic, but because they are calibrated to reality in a way that most people have completely lost. Whether you are a millennial drowning in validation seeking, whether you are Gen Z lost in an algorithm, whether you are a baby boomer still chasing a dream that was sold to you decades ago, here is what Gen X figured out the hard way. Your struggle is not your enemy, it is your teacher. The discomfort you are running from is the exact thing that would make you unbreakable. The validation you are seeking from others is the exact thing that is keeping you controllable. And the screens you are staring at right now are doing exactly what they were designed to do, keeping you comfortable, keeping you distracted, keeping you in line. Gen X did not have that option. And that is why they became who they became. The question is not whether you admire Gen X, the question is what are you going to do about it? Final thought: Gen X was not special because of what they were given. They were special because of what they were not given. No safety nets, no participation trophies, no algorithms, no validation, no rescue, just reality, raw and unfiltered. And in that raw, unfiltered reality, they built something that no other generation has managed to build since. A mind that cannot be bought, a spirit that cannot be broken, and an identity that cannot be controlled. The world tried to shape them. It failed, and somewhere a Gen Xer just read that sentence and did not even smile. Because they already knew,